We're live. Green flag is dropped, and we are going to Pocono, one of the least eventful tracks, one of the most boring tracks, but we get a back-to-back doubleheader, so it's great from a betting and handicapping perspective. We're going to have some great info to go with this weekend in the mountains of Pennsylvania. But first, we're going to recap the Nashville race. First time Cup had been there in several decades this past weekend, but it was not a surprising result, to say the least, with Kyle Larson once again winning for the third straight race, second points race, and he won the All-Star race in between. Before I dig in too much of those top 10 results, let me bring in Rocky Atkinson, sportsmemo.com, for the Rocky recap from the 1.3-mile Nashville track last week.
As you said, Kyle Larson does it again. He gets his fourth win of the season, winning in Nashville this time. Larson dominated yet another race as he led 264 laps out of 300. Larson's dominating, winning his third race in a row. That don't count winning the All-Star race. So it's actually 4 in a row for him. He hasn't finished worse than second since May the 2nd of this year. Ross Chastain had another solid run, finishing second. William Byron finished third. Eric Almirola hopefully turned his poor season around with a solid fourth-place finish. Kevin Harvick finished fifth. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., we got to mention him. He finished in the sixth spot. Daniel Suarez was seventh. Kurt Busch was eighth. Christopher Bell in ninth. And Joey Logano rounded out the top 10. Stage 1 winners officially Kurt Busch after Chase Elliott was disqualified after the race. Kyle Larson won stage 2. We do need to mention again that Denny Hamlin and Kevin Harvick still have not won a race this year. Very strange to me after their domination performance last year. Hamlin has run well as he still leads the point standings just ahead of Kyle Larson, who has been closing that gap big time past few races. Hamlin sits in 12th in the playoff standings. Harvick's back in 13th. Austin Dillon, Tyler Reddick, Chris Buescher rounds out the top 16 in the playoff standings at this time. The next 4 guys on the outside looking in are Kurt Busch, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Matt DiBenedetto, and Ross Chastain. Only 9 races left until the playoffs start. So we'll be keeping a closer eye on some of these bubble drivers moving forward.
Yeah, and let's keep in mind, as you mentioned, the 2 H's, Harvick and Hamlin, of course, with Chase Elliott, who you also mentioned, who was disqualified despite being this defending point series, or not the point series champion, but the series champion. They combined for 21 wins last year, and Elliott's the only one to get a victory circle this year, and now he's got a little bit of a DQ problem, which we'll talk about in a moment. But keep in mind, Pocono, the doubleheader last year, Hamlin and Harvick were the 2 top drivers in those 2 races, the guys to see if they can get that elusive win this weekend in Pocono. But quickly recapping Nashville, once again, that's a 1.3-mile low-banked, 14-degree bank track. It will translate to several tracks this season. We have once again, I think we have some of the sharpest viewers of this show, of any show on WagerTalk TV. Maybe not the biggest numbers, but per capita, percentage-wise, some really sharp sports bettors. And one of the viewers, of course, last week mentioned Kentucky as a comparable track, which we did not talk about on the show. And I thought that was a good analogy. And Eric Almirola, who actually has done well at Kentucky over the years, he had the pole. And then Ross Chastain, the surprising second-place finish overall, as Rocky mentioned. So we'll keep an eye on how these guys do at Kentucky. Obviously, Kyle Larson will be a guy we look at almost every track, including Kentucky. But we have to talk about Chase Elliott. This is a guy who overall, they might put him at the bottom of the standings, but they still have his driver rating for the race, which was a 98. Would have been basically like the 6th or 7th best driver rating for the day. And as Rocky said, he had a good stage finish also before being disqualified. So Andy Lang, WagerTalk.com, I'll throw it to you. And let's kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. I have a feeling that the Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Award is pretty much a unanimous sweep this week, Chase Elliott. So let me know your thoughts.
Yeah, anytime you get wiped off the board, like completely erased, like you didn't even have a race, yeah, you get the award this week. So, I mean, 5 loose lug nuts. I guess I'm. How did the wheel even stay on? That it really blows my mind that the wheel didn't come off. So 5 loose lug nuts. I mean, first off, it's very dangerous. There's a reason why the penalty is that harsh. It may seem very harsh, but having that many loose lug nuts, if a tire comes off and flies, heaven forbid, into the stands or flies down pit road or something, it's a very dangerous situation. So they have to crack down on that. But to get completely disqualified from a race for having 5 loose lug nuts, that's an easy win this week. I would also like to point out that they worked so hard to integrate Clint Boyer and Jeff Gordon into the booth together only to have Jeff Gordon announce he's leaving the booth and going to Hendricks next year. So that was awesome. They worked really hard to get that crew get it glued together, and then all of a sudden Gordon's going to leave. So I had to chuckle at that. A very interesting race in Nashville. And believe it or not, I stayed at a Ramada Inn on Tuesday night, which was directly across from the Kentucky Motor Speedway, believe it or not. Wow. It was pretty cool. Yeah, beautiful track. Absolutely gorgeous track.
Yeah, and it's the epitome of the cookie cutters. And once again, we didn't have a lot of notes on Nashville going in, but I think Nashville pretty much ran like an intermediate speedway, kind of like we thought it would. It's a little bit lower. You know, hey, speaking of lower bank, let's transition into Pocono. I mean, this is I think one of the most unique tracks, but it's not exactly the most exciting track. I mean, first of all, it's a triangle, the tricky triangle, whatever you want. But let's keep in mind that you might say, how can you have a triangle track? Well, there's 3 turns, and there's an extremely long straightaway because of that. It's a 2.5-mile track. The only other ones over 2 miles, you know, we got Michigan and California too. The only other 2.5-mile tracks are Daytona and Talladega, or super speedway restrictor plates. So this is a flat track, though. It doesn't have the banking like Daytona and Talladega, so they don't get as fast around the turns. But it's twice the size, 2.5 the size of 1 mile Phoenix flat track or New Hampshire. So it's a very unique track. The one guys I think, and I'll throw it to you, Rocky, for your thoughts on how you're going to handicap it, but I've always thought of Indianapolis Motor Speedway, which is another, what is it, Andy would know, 2.5-mile track. You know, it's a flat 4-corner. But the banking is what we talk about a lot. It's not the distance, it's the banking. And that's why Nashville was a little bit of a lower bank than some of the super speedways, but or intermediate tracks. Rocky, do you agree with Indianapolis? Do you look at New Hampshire and Phoenix as well, despite being shorter, they're flat tracks? And give me a pick as well. Like I said, like Double H's, Harvick and Hamlin were in full effect. Will they finally get a win this week at Pocono?
Yeah, I believe Indianapolis does have some similarity with Pocono. That's really the only track I look at when I'm handicapping Pocono. Of course, I look at track history. That's the most important thing to me. You know, and then I look at the Indianapolis finishes as well, and also look at some momentum. We want to have good momentum going into this race as well. So one guy I'm looking at is, and you just mentioned him, Denny Hamlin. I think he's kind of owned this racetrack over the last several years. He has 6 wins here, 13 top 5 finishes, 20 top 10 finishes in his 30 races here in Pocono. Average finish is a very solid 11.3 at this track. And over the past 2 years, past 3 years, Hamlin has 2 wins, 3 top 5 finishes, and 5 top 10 finishes in 6 races here with an average finish of 9.2. So I'm looking for Hamlin to be at the front this weekend.
Yeah, and of course, Denny Hamlin, I mentioned Harvick and Hamlin winning the 2 Pocono races last year on a Saturday and Sunday. It was a back-to-back doubleheader. Not only did they win the 2 races, they finished 1-2 in each of them in Indy. Hamlin finished second in day 1, came right back and finished first in day 2. But here's what's crazy about Hamlin. He only finished 9th in stage 2, no top 10 in stage 1, and then he finished 10th in stage 2 in the race he won, nothing in stage 1. So he didn't exactly dominate races and lead up front all day. It was a little bit of a peculiar win. Andy, who's somebody else you're looking at here for Pocono this week?
Yeah, I think the comparison to Indianapolis is appropriate. You know, long track, long straightaways, could be fuel mileage, not a lot of fans show up, boring to watch on TV. There's a lot of similarities between Indianapolis and Pocono. Ticket sales have been plummeting, you know, all the things that they have in common. I'm going to go with William Byron. And I will say, Rocky and I decided that neither one of us are going to take Kyle Larson as a driver to recommend. We all get it. We all know it. Kyle Larson is your number 1 driver. So we're not going to mention him as each of our 3. Just know that we know that's a gimme and that's a softball layup. So we're not going to mention Larson. He's the runaway favorite. But yeah, William Byron, he continues to be a head-to-head machine. He's a daily fantasy monster, a seasonal fantasy monster. If you combine Nashville, Charlotte, Dover, Darlington, and Kansas, those last 5 races without the road courses, he's got the best average finish in NASCAR with a 4.8 place average finish. And even though we've got this Hendricks resurgence this year, just complete domination the past, call it, 6 to 8 weeks, He had the 7th best average finish in both Pocono races last year, so he wasn't terrible here last year. He was pretty decent. He was a top 10 guy, and now that Hendricks has really improved, I've got to have him on the tops of my list of guys behind probably Kyle Larson on that team.
Yeah, and this once again is a 2.5 mile track, so I mean horsepower becomes an issue because they have a long straightaway. That straightaway is as long as some tracks are total. It's about a mile or so. So that horsepower with Hendricks is going to be tough to go against. And I will mention Larson again, though, because once again, he didn't run last year. So anybody's looking at last year's results, we're like, wow, Larson wasn't top 10, but he was, of course, off the grid for both races. Byron, as you said, if he was anywhere competitive at a track last year, you can multiply that by he's been just lights out this year. And, yeah, you take away those road courses, he's been basically an automatic top 10. So William Byron, Kyle Larson, and Denny Hamlin, 3 good picks so far. Rocky, who's somebody else you're looking at Pocono?
I'm going to look at Kyle Busch. Kyle's, I think he's turned the corner a little bit. He had some practice going on over the last few races there or whatever. No practice this weekend, no qualifying. The lineup's already set. But he does run well here. He has 3 wins, 9 top 5 finishes, 16 top 10 finishes in 32 races here in Pocono. Average finish is 16th at this track, which isn't very good. But over the last 3 years here, he has 2 wins, 4 top 5s, 5 top 10s in 6 races with an average finish of 9.5, which is very solid numbers here. I'm going to look for Kyle Busch to run good this weekend.
Yeah, once again, just to look at the overall future odds, Kyle Larson, depending on where you look, is about 2-1. I even seen him less than 2-1 at some of the sharp offshores, which tells you something. And that's why we've all said, we like Larson. We're not going to waste too much time talking about it. But Denny Hamlin, around 7-1. Kyle Busch, I'm seeing 8-1 as the 3rd favorite, at least at DraftKings right now. So he is on the bookmakers, the odds makers' radar. And, of course, Kyle Busch has had a much better season this year than last year when he was really struggling at this point with the no practice sessions, these back-to-back weekends. Of course, you got a little bit of a practice session after the first race last year. I guess you can maybe look at the second race, and that would give you a more true indication. But he wasn't really strong at Pocono last year, but historically he's been okay. In the first race, he was actually better, surprisingly. He finished 5th, and then he was outside the top 10 the second day, which is a little strange. But, Andy, these guys all make sense. Who's somebody else you're looking at Pocono?
I'm going to throw you a curveball here. I'm going to go Brad Keselowski. Brad Keselowski. We don't really hear much from him these days, but whenever there's a big track that potentially weather could always be an issue, there's weather all over the country, rainstorms, thunderstorms. There's a potential for fuel strategy always at Pocono. Guys get on different pit strategies. I just always want to have Brad Keselowski when there's a fuel strategy or a crazy pit stop strategy race. He and his crew chief are the best. And here's another weird one. It's been 29 races since Brad Keselowski has won a non-restrictor plate race. That streak has only happened one other time since 2015. Brad does not go this long without a win. And normally when he gets to this point, they roll the dice. And this is a track that's set up really good where if he doesn't have the horsepower to keep up, they will try something different. They need to move up in the standings. A lot of guys do. But Brad, I think, is a primetime candidate, kind of come out of nowhere. And if you get something weird that happens at the end in the last 20 laps, we saw it last week where guys got off of different pit strategies and guys had pitted at lap 58 and lap 68. And someone could have easily snuck up and taken that win from Larson. So I'm going to roll the dice with Brad Keselowski on the chance that something weird happens at the end and Brad is going to be there to steal one.
Yeah, Andy, I knew where you were going with that when you said Brad right away. I thought fuel mileage. He has probably been as good as anybody. I think of Michigan, a 2-mile track in which he's used that over the years. Of course, California as well. And by the way, going back to Kyle Larson, I know he didn't run here last year, but keep in mind when he was second place, Kyle Larson with the weaker 42 team over the years, his 2 most dominant tracks, everybody thought, were the 2-mile tracks of California and Michigan, and now we're on a 2.5 mile. So it's another reason why he's less than a 2-1 favorite in a lot of spots, despite not running last year. By the way, starting grid: Kyle Larson first, William Byron second, Kevin Harvick, Joey Logano third and fourth. Guys we haven't mentioned yet. Kyle Busch fifth. So some of the names we've mentioned so far. Hamlin, by the way, are starting pretty good spots. Not that it matters too much, especially as Andy said, if weather or mileage becomes a play, or fuel mileage. Denny Hamlin, by the way, guys, plays that game also. And if I recall, the reason he didn't have a lot of good stage finishes, but was top 2 in both races last year, some of that came into play as well last summer. Rocky, who's somebody else you're looking at here at the 2.5 mile adventure-filled flat track of Pocono.
Well, we got to look at the guy, Kevin Harvick. Not having a great season, but not having a bad season. Just not having the one we're used to, or as far as last year anyway. But he has 1 win here, 14 top 5 finishes, 20 top 10s in 40 races here at Pocono. Average finish is very solid, 12 at this track. And over the past 3 years here, he has 1 win, 4 top 5s, 5 top 10s with an average finish of 6.5, which is the best among all drivers. So I'm looking for Kevin Harvick to step it up a little bit this weekend and have a great finish.
Yeah, and Harvick's another guy that came to mind as Keselowski. I mean, they're probably the 2 most consistent drivers. And Kyle Busch, you could say, has been very consistent. He did have great results last year, but he was still sneaking into top 10. And so, I mean, once again, if strategy becomes a part of this race, you know, guys like Hamlin and Harvick who haven't won yet, Keselowski, as Andy said, you haven't won on a real track in a while. I think they were worth a little sprinkle for that reason. That could be the real hiccup here to a heavy favorite like Kyle Larson and some of the other guys at the top of the board. Andy, what's another guy you're looking at, another thought here on Pocono?
Well, if you thought Brad Keselowski was a curveball, I got another one for you. I'm going to throw out Eric Almirola as a sleeper that works really, really good in daily fantasy head-to-heads. His finishes this year have been really bad on paper, but it's been wrecks and flat tires and kind of weird things. So last week at Nashville, he gets qualifying, and he qualifies on the pole. And he was one of the first guys to go out, so he got a good track to qualify on. So I thought I'll probably fade and, fall back. But he finished 4th. And in the last 2 races last year at Pocono, the 2 best average finishes were Denny Hamlin and Kevin Harvick. 3rd best was Eric Almirola. So last year, he put on a really good display of racing and knowledge at Pocono to come in behind Harvick and Hamlin. And he had the 4th best average green flag running position in those 2 races. So these were not lucky, fluky finishes. He was running up front. He stayed up there. He's a great sleeper this week. And he showed last week if he can start up front and keep his car clean, he can run top 5. So I'll take Eric Almirola as a guy to keep your eye on.
Yeah, how do you like these odds, Andy? I was to just tell you without giving you the name that this guy finished 3rd and 5th in the 2 races last year, was on the pole last week and is starting 11th this week and is with one of the big teams still. And you can get him at 10-1 to be top 3 or 6.5-1 right now for a top 5. I mean, that would seem a little bit off. So, yeah, and by the way, he's 40-1 at DraftKings to win outright. And I love the fact that he has struggled. We talked about early this season, we all had a lot of bad beats. And I said, this is the time to jump on Rocky at Sports Memo or Andy at WagerTalk because those things even out. And it's been the case. Rocky went on a huge run right after that. Andy's been winning as well. It's like those things even out. And Almirola is a good driver. He's a playoff caliber driver on a good team, Kevin Harvick's team, keep in mind. So, yeah, and Chastain, had a good run last week. Some of these guys that have struggled, I think, are starting to come out a little bit, and they're worth a look. So, yeah, I really like where you're going with Almirola. You might have a long shot as well, but that would qualify as a long shot. But I think he's in contention to win, which normally we don't say with these long shots. So, Eric Almirola, 40-1, 10-1, 6.5-1 for outright 3 and top 5, and he was 3rd and 5th last year. And by the way, in stages 1 and 2, he was 1st and 2nd in that first race when he finished 3rd. So he was solid all day. Rocky, what's something else you want to look at here for Pocono? Long shot, sleeper, which angle you want to go with?
Yeah, I got a sleeper here. Actually, worse odds than Almirola. Kurt Busch. I seen him at 45-1. Kurt Busch does have 3 wins here in Pocono, 14 top 5 finishes, 20 top 10s in 39 races here, average finish of 14.5. He ran good last week. He's one of the older gentlemen on the circuit, but I don't think he's done yet. I'm not saying he's going to win the race, but I'm going to say we can probably find a good head-to-head matchup this weekend with Kurt Busch and maybe even a top 10.
Yeah, and Kurt Busch ran well last week. I know they're different tracks, but there is something about current momentum. And other than maybe a restrictor plate or road course, I think all tracks still have a little bit of similarity, and there's a little bit of momentum. And Busch ran well. He's been in contention at times this year. He's on a decent team as well. Chastain, as I said, ran well. Almirola, some of these guys are the mid-tier, lesser teams that are still major teams are starting to run better. And we often see that. You get these powerhouse teams like Hendrick, Gibbs, Penske, but Stewart-Haas is still in that mix. And, Ganassi, they're still in that mix. And sometimes they catch up a little bit as the season goes on. And Busch, by the way, last year was good in the second Pocono race especially. He actually won stage 1 last year in the second Pocono race. So someone to look at. Kurt Busch and Eric Almirola are definitely guys that can win races at 40 and 50 to 1 payoff prices so far that we've talked about. By the way, he's a little bit more. Almirola's 10 to 1. Busch is 12 to 1 for a top 5. So pretty good payoffs if either one of them hit. Andy, Almirola was a long shot. You got another one, or do you want to go with the play against guys? What angle you want to go with?
I'll go with a driver to fade. And can I tell my Pocono bad beat story? This is one of my favorite NASCAR bad beats. So in 2010, I was in a fantasy league and I was leading, and I had 4 drivers, and they were all running 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th, which would have easily kept me in the lead. And they all 4 wrecked into each other on the last lap to finish 27th, 28th, 29th, and 30th. And to this day, I still remember who they are. It was Casey Kane, Mark Martin, Greg Biffle, and Marcus Ambrose.
Wow.
So I remember that.
Some decent
It
drivers.
was over 10 years ago, and I still remember it. My phone blew up with guys in the fantasy league. Like, oh, looks like somebody's not in first place anymore. Like, no, I'm not. So, yeah, I'll do a driver to fade. Ryan Blaney has just been awful. Take out the road course races. In the last 5 races, his average finish is 18.4. This is a Penske driver. That's behind Chris Buescher, Ross Chastain, Matt DiBenedetto, Ryan Newman, and Ricky Stenhouse. He is 1 spot ahead of Bubba Wallace in average finishes over those last 5 races. That is not getting a lot out of your car. And Mr. Penske has got to be noticing what is going on with Ryan Blaney and saying, what's happening here? Let's pick up the pace here a little bit. But Ryan Blaney is just in an absolute funk. It's been a bad year for him, and it's not gotten any better over the last 5 races. So if you're looking for a guy to fade, I'll be looking at him in head-to-head matchups.
Yeah, once again, when we're talking about guys to fade, these are head-to-head matchups because we always talk about play-on drivers, and you can sprinkle a little bit on top 5s, outrights on these long shots. But the head-to-heads, they've only got to beat one guy, not the other 37 guys or whatever it is. And, right now with Blaney, he's tough to trust. And I say it week after week, ever since last season. He could be one of the fastest cars out there, but he finds a way to underachieve. And that's how Bowman and Byron were last year. This year they're getting the finishes, but Blaney still is not. Blew the last week. And last year at Pocono, the first race, he finishes 3rd and 4th in the first 2 stages and then finishes 12th. And then right after that, the next day, he finishes 2nd in stage 1 and then outside the top 10 for stages 2 and finishes 23rd for the race, 22nd for the race. Got progressively worse each day, basically, with more experience on the track. That's not a good sign, right? And his teammates, Keselowski and Logano, are dangerous to play against because they always kind of find a way to get top 10s with lesser cars. Blaney does the exact opposite. And, Andy, it'll be interesting to see if his days maybe are numbered here in the near future, if he doesn't start getting some wins and better results. Rocky, Andy snuck in Bubba Wallace in the play against segment. I thought that was very slick because he keeps his streak going now for mentioning Bubba Wallace as the play against. I don't know if that's your guy or not, Rocky, or if you have somebody else that could be a play against this week.
No, I'm going to leave Bubba alone this week. Driver, my play against driver and my free head-to-head matchup this week kind of goes hand in hand, so I'm going to go ahead and get into both. My free head-to-head matchup is Christopher Bell over Tyler Reddick. And Reddick is my play against driver this weekend. He's raced here twice, both last year, of course. He finished 30th and 35th here in Pocono last year. And it looks like one driver they haven't paired up with is Christopher Bell. And Bell was raced here twice as well last year. And he had a solid 4th place finish in one race. And the other race was a DNF. With that solid finish and Reddick's troubles here, we're going to look to play on Christopher Bell to finish ahead of Tyler Reddick this weekend.
Yeah, and keep in mind, Christopher Bell should be even better this year because he's in the 20 car now, Gibbs Racing. And we've already mentioned Kyle Busch and Hamlin were 2 of Rocky's picks, actually. So obviously he thinks highly of the Gibbs team. And we haven't mentioned Truex. Truex is another guy. He hasn't not been running well the last month or so, but he's the other Gibbs driver in that stable. So it makes a lot of sense there. You're getting a better team, guy in a better car who has a better history already. So a lot of things working for you with Christopher Bell over Reddick. And once again, Rocky's play there is Reddick. Other sports books, and Andy, you can touch on this real quick because you wanted to mention it. probably what I consider the sharpest offshore book last week, 1 hour before the race. It was literally 1 hour. I checked at 2:30 Eastern. They still weren't up. At 2:45 Eastern, they had the matchups up for a 3:30 Eastern race. So literally 45 minutes before the race, they put up all 30 head-to-head matchups. I'm like, why even bother? It really is just insane. So once again, you have to look all weekend. But Rocky's play against guy is Tyler Reddick, and he's seen Bell over him right now in a head-to-head that's available as of Friday. Andy, quickly touch on the head-to-head dilemma and maybe give me a free whatever angle you want to go with for your free play.
Sure, a couple things to go over. We have a Formula One race that's going on this weekend, and the U.S. books like DraftKings, they are now offering live in-race betting on Formula One. This is a really, really big deal. One of my wagering friends over in Europe has this option, has had it forever. And so we watched last week's Formula One race, and we were able to crush the live betting with the odds. So if you guys are interested in doing that, just follow me on Twitter at Bump Sports and let me know, because we chat back and forth and we DM each other. We'll be happy to do it over social media so everyone can take advantage of it. We hit a huge hit on Max Verstappen at Monaco just because we were awake early in the morning and happened to see the Charles Leclerc situation. And now with live betting, this is an option. So if you guys are interested in that, just follow me on Twitter at Bump Sports. I'll be doing again this Sunday. And then the head-to-head. Okay, so Chase Elliott gets disqualified. So you would think it goes down as him finishing last because that's what the official race results are. I know this from experience. The books do not take into consideration the official race results. They look at who crossed the finish line ahead of the other person, and that's it. And I've noticed this because I've had to go round and round with books in Formula One, because in Formula One, they use timing. And there was a situation a couple years ago where the driver that was in the lead, Sebastian Vettel, had a 10-second penalty. And Lewis Hamilton, all he had to do was keep within 10 seconds of Sebastian Vettel. And when the timing worked itself out, Lewis Hamilton was going to be deemed the winner. So Hamilton finished 5 seconds behind Vettel. 10-second penalty is assessed. The books view this as Sebastian Vettel hitting ahead of Lewis Hamilton. The official results have Hamilton ahead of Vettel. So you have to check with your sports books about that. But they all, and I've checked with all of them, whoever crosses the finish line ahead of the other, that's how it's viewed. So when Chase Elliott crossed the finish line, the books immediately graded them. So if you had a bet involving Chase Elliott, how he crossed the finish line, that's what the books grade. So disqualifications don't count. And you can argue with the books all you want, you won't win, because I haven't won any of those arguments. So that's how the books do the grading. It's very important to know. It happens very rarely, but it does happen. So sometimes you come out on the good side, sometimes you come out on the bad side. But just understand, they don't take into account official results, penalties after the race. That's not how they do it. It's who crosses the finish line ahead of the other person. So.
Yeah, and Andy, that's consistent too, with other sports like horse racing and whatnot. I mean, you have to have some kind of set standard like that, because a lot of times you don't know until 1 or 2 days later the actual, change on this stuff. So, yeah, anybody that happened to, it stinks. But like you said, Andy, it should even out. Although, it might only happen once to you ever, so it might not even out. But you have to have consistency, and that's not the sports book's fault. So once again, it stinks. But real quick on Chase Elliott, he's had a lot of races this year where he's failed inspection and whatnot, and some of the Hendrick guys have in general, and they're running really good. And I actually had one of our viewers, Jimmy Jackson, watched. He chimed on Twitter. He's like, "Are they using illegal sticky substance?" And I was like, "That's a good one." With the baseball cheating that's going on. And Jimmy's he's watching right now. Probably that was a good one. It was actually his dad. It was a Father's Day special.
It's good. It's really good.
You do have to wonder, big picture. Are they doing something? And keep in mind, Kyle Larson is technically the 48 team now. They switched. The 88 went to the 48. The 48 became the 5. Jimmy Johnson over the years had a couple of New England Patriot moments during his dynasty. I think Kyle Larson's really good. He did well with the lesser team, so we've all talked about him being great. But they are crushing. They've had top 4 finishes with all 4 drivers. In several races they've been like 1, 2, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hard to imagine they are that much better than the 2 teams, Penske and Gibbs, that have been better than them for several years. We'll see. I think they're pushing the envelope. We might see this happen again. And the lug nut thing is kind of a one-off. I don't think that's how they've been winning races, running without lug nuts. But if there's something else going on, we'll see if they catch them though. Had this been something more serious than lug nuts, or as more beneficial to the engine or something, I'd be more concerned. But so we see otherwise, it's hard to fade Hendrick. So Andy, give me a free play though for the weekend at Pocono.
Well, it's a really great point because this reminds me kind of remember the steroid era where steroids were prevalent in baseball, and it was like, well, that guy's never hit over 10 home runs, and he's got 47 this year. That's kind of strange. There was a Formula One issue.
Bigger. His head size. Barry Bonds' head size grew an entire hat size. And yes, if you notice, Rocky has a new hat on for the first time, so I'm getting a little concerned. We might have to have an intervention with Rocky here about his steroid use, but I digress.
There was a Formula One issue a couple years ago where Ferraris couldn't keep up with anybody, and they go on summer break and come back, and all of a sudden they're just winning race after race after race, and they got caught cheating. So, where there's smoke, there's fire, and when all of a sudden overnight there's I wouldn't rule it out. But that being said, there are ebbs and flows in NASCAR, and Hendricks has never been this strong, but they'd been down a little bit, so maybe they just made some improvements. And to build on that, even if they are cheating, I want a piece of them. My best play is Hendricks to win again. This is 5 races in a row that they've won. That was a no sweat win last week with taking Hendricks to win. And I know the easy play could say, well, just take Kyle Larson to win. But if something weird happens to him, when you're taking this play at plus money, you're getting Byron, Bowman, and Chase Elliott. These are 3 guys that are going to be up near the top regardless. So you're kind of protecting yourself if something happens in pit strategy or if there's an accident or flat tire or anything like that with Larson. These are 4 of the best guys in NASCAR right now. And on DraftKings right now, it's plus 105. I'll continue to ride the Hendricks train as long as they're getting away with whatever they're getting away with, allegedly, or if they're just in the groove, I'll take them.
Yeah, and by the way, at DraftKings also, they got Chevy at minus 109. And I know a lot of sports books out there, people might be saying, I can't get specific teams to win, but almost all the major sports books have manufacturer to win. So you can get Chevy at a little bit of juice, but you're getting some of those off drivers. If something crazy happens, you might get a one-off with one of the other guys. If it becomes a fuel mileage race or a weather race, you have a couple other Chevys that could sneak in there. So once again, Andy likes Hendrick specifically, but you could also go with Team Chevy, and it's been cashing left and right, largely due to Kyle Larson winning left and right. But a lot of good drivers in the mix again this week. And they've got the Spider Tack, that sticky substance they're putting on the grip on the tires like the baseball pitchers are using maybe as well. We will see. And if it turns out,
it's just sweat. Turns out it's just sweat.
Sunscreen and rosin. By the way, the Trevor Bauer video, real quick, with a ball sticking to his hand, he goes, "This is just sweat." And then later in the video, he puts his hand up and it's black. It's like guitar on it. I'm like, he's full of it. The guy's just point blank lying about this. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But hey, check back. Speaking of baseball videos, I did that one a few Sundays ago, Sunday, June 6th. It's still here archived on WagerTalk TV if you all want to get a little more info on what we're talking about, joking about here. The baseball situation. Of course, great free content all weekend long. Rocky, what you got going on at sportsmemo.com for this weekend?
Hopefully some baseball, some NBA playoffs, some NASCAR, of course. And I'm running pretty good. I'm 40-29, my last 69 NHL. I'm 47-25, my last 72 NBA. I'm 48-27, my last 75 Major League Baseball. And my free plays are 43-19, 69% my last 62 freebies. So be sure to check me out, sportsmemo.com. Also NASCAR 106-63, 63% the last 3+ years with all my NASCAR picks. So check me out, sportsmemo.com.
Yeah, once again, Rocky gives out great free information. He talks about those free plays being red hot. Rocketman Sports on Twitter, at Rocketman Sports, gives out great free information. Andy, you got a promo code. What you got going on at WagerTalk.com?
Well, coming off a huge, dominating, undefeated week in NASCAR last week, 1-0. But I have But you know how we promote 100% last NASCAR play. Yeah, it's a 3-day pass. I've had this weekend circled all week. Huge NBA playoffs. I've had a great read on player props. I'm 20-7 in the last 27, and we're hitting over 60% in Major League Baseball the last 30 days. And this weekend has been circled all week. So I set up a 3-day pass for everybody. Just use the promo code Andy3. You get your $30 off a 3-day pass, and that gets you Major League Baseball, NBA, and then you also get any golf dailies that will have NASCAR if there's a Formula One play. But it's really to encompass the success we've had with Major League Baseball and NBA. We have a loaded card. We have 9 combined MLB and NBA plays just for tonight. So just a 3-day pass. If you have a great night tonight, which we fully expect, it pays for itself and then some. So promo code Andy3 gets you $30 off a 3-day pass.
Awesome, and that's WagerTalk.com. And once again, Andy's on Twitter as well, @BumpSports, @BumpSports on Twitter. And I'm on WagerTalk.com as well, Steve Merril. We've been running hot, to say the least. Swept the board 6 of the past 7 days in all sports, 12-2 run the last 7 days. And I've got a promo code as well for a 7-day package. Get Andy's 3-day because he does props. He specializes in sports I don't cover. I do the other sports. It's a great combo right there. Get Andy's 3-day, get my 7-day for just $69. Pass 69. Pass 69 gets you 7 days of all sports for just $69. Normally it's $119, so that's a $50 discount there. 7 days for $69 with Pass 69. Steve Merril, WagerTalk.com, and of course on Twitter @Steve Merril, 2 R's, 1 L. Hey guys, great show. It's great information as always. Be sure to check back each and every week right here on Wager Talk TV on Friday nights for more NASCAR life in the fast lane. Subscribe to Wager Talk TV. We're almost hitting 72,000 subscribers. Let's get there. Give it a like the video if you found the information useful, and how could you not have found it useful? And most importantly, leave us a comment below. We love our comments. We interact with you. We read all of them. Let us know your top 3 picks weekend at Pocono on both Saturday and Sunday. And for Rocky Atkinson, SportsMemo.com, Andy Lang, and myself, Steve Merril, WagerTalk.com, thanks for watching. Best of luck this weekend.